understand the economy, you have to understand human nature.
This podcast is powered by Acast.
How you doing there? It is time for the podcast against the background of a historic weekend of elections in Europe that we're actually going out too early to give you any update on. Because that's the sort of podcast we are. You don't follow us for the news. Follow us for analysis. It's the hot.
We're just so ahead of the game.
We're so ahead of the game.
Stuff hasn't happened yet.
Stuff hasn't happened yet. We're actually clairvoyants, right? There is two types of podcasters. There is the forecaster and the past caster. You don't want to be a past caster. A past caster tells you what happened yesterday. You know that shit, right? You want to be the forecaster, right? So John and I are in the game of pretending we know what's going to happen this weekend and then talking about it and then pretending it's all going out Tuesday.
Correcting it next week.
Exactly. We are of the assumption that Labour will win in Britain.
And it's a fair assumption.
In France, it'll be extremely tight with Le Pen shading it, but maybe not getting an overall majority and a wee bit of horse trading. But what we do know is that in the words of Yeats, the centre is not holding on the continent of Europe. Okay. Mm-hmm. However, in the UK, people are going back to some familiarity. And I'm going to try and get a take on all of this, John, involving the 4 R's today.
Ooh, right.
The 4 R's are Revolut, which is going to open in Ireland. This is part of our discussion.
Yeah.
So we're going to look at the underlying economic trends that explain the politics, right? Mm-hmm. Revolut, republicanism, real jobs. Would you ever go and get a real job? Know that thing, right?
I've heard that many times.
Okay. And Rembrandt.
Rembrandt. Okay. Tie them together
I'm going to tie them all together, and they are of a piece, right? I woke up this morning, John, and I thought of Rembrandt's father, right?
Right.
And rarely in my
Didn't
life
know.
have I woken up thinking of Rembrandt's father. Well, I didn't wake up.
Yeah.
But over the course of an hour of thinking about the world, I was thinking about Rembrandt's father for 2 reasons. One is I got a call from a friend of mine in Stockholm. And the last time I'd been in Stockholm, I'd gone to see a thing called the Wasser Museum, which is an amazing museum of a preserved ship. And the ship actually, on its maiden voyage, capsized. Big, massive.
Right. Bit like the Titanic.
Bit like the Titanic, except Swedish one. So they preserved it. They have a museum to it.
Right.
As opposed to Belfast, they have a museum to the Titanic. There's no evidence of the Titanic.
Yes.
But I heard the greatest thing, actually, speaking of Belfast, the greatest T-shirt that I saw in the late 90s in East Belfast. 2 lads walking down, one lad with a Titanic T-shirt, and it's written on the top, it was okay when it left here.
Yeah.
Very NI, very Belfast. Big up to the Belfast sense of humour, which we do love. Anyway, let's go back. The Wasser was going to Amsterdam.
Right.
And the reason I was thinking about Rembrandt is Rembrandt's father was a miller called Herman van Rijn. Rembrandt's name was Rembrandt van Rijn. And Rembrandt's father had been a miller, and his grandfather had been a miller, and his grandfather before them had been a miller. And then Rembrandt ends up being a painter, right? And I was thinking, A, why did that happen? And B, we have evidence that Rembrandt's father was really, really upset at him becoming a painter. Because Rembrandt's father wanted him to have a real job. And a real job in his eyes was basically going back and being a miller like his father and his grandfather and his grandfather and all his people before him, right? So the question I've always been interested in is, why did Rembrandt become a painter in the city that he did at the time that he did? And what's this got to do with the real world of real jobs? All the background noise to this was last weekend I was with a couple of what I would call concerned parents, right? Remember the inner city concerned parents?
On
right?
a march.
Yeah. There's usually the concerned parents against drugs. This was the concerned parents against accountancy, right? They're worried about why their children are not becoming accountants. This is people of our age, right? And they were musing over their pints, kind of disgruntled dads and rather concerned mothers about, we're talking about our kids, and there was a general perception and a general tone in the discussion that they've no real jobs. Why can't they go get a real job?
Yeah. Good pensionable job.
Good pensionable jobs, exactly. Yeah. Because in their 20s, it's very, very hard, right? So the real job idea, we think, is something that afflicts us right now. But if I bring you back to Rembrandt, it's going to explain why it afflicted people back then. But the lack of real jobs, or what I would call legacy jobs, does create a political instability. Why? Because people see their kids or themselves not having that stake we talked about, not having the real jobs, not having the legacy jobs, and then they suddenly vote for the person who says, don't worry, I will make it right for you. I will fix it for you, which is the sort of Le Pen or the extreme left-wing view, or, God forbid, your friend across the way with the orange face, right? He's the same sort of carry-on.
Yeah.
So I want to start.
He's the ultimate legacy job fella, anyway.
Well, he's just a rich dad.
Yeah.
Yeah. A rich dad and...
Who was given a leg up, and now he's giving his sons a leg up along with a bag of Coke.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Don Jr.
Oh, really? I didn't know.
Totally.
I didn't know. Anyway, let us go back to the economics of the moment, which is this political and economic insecurity seen through the eyes. I know this is a very eclectic podcast of Rembrandt's dad. So I want you to get into the head of Herman von Rijn.
We have to go back to Holland in...
Going back to the 17th century, John. And the reason I go back is because what was happening in Holland in the 17th century was globalization, demographic change, political change, social change, and massive technological change. And this is exactly what is going on right now.
I can hear it now. I can hear the horse hooves. I can hear the buzz of the city.
You've got the whoosh of the boats on the canals. You've got the little spires piercing through the cloudy Dutch sky. What really strikes you about Amsterdam, and this again, part of this is taken from the upcoming book, but it's actually also reading. John gave me a present the other day. He does this all the time, so he doesn't have to read them. Of Philip Blum's Nature's Mutiny, How the Little Ice Age Transformed the West and Shaped the Present. I, of course, read this book.
So would you sum it up for me there,
I'll
please?
sum it up for you now. Anyway, we're in Amsterdam. What is fascinating about Amsterdam is the fact that from about 1600 to 1700, Amsterdam is the richest city in Europe and one of the richest cities in the world. Rembrandt is born in 1606. Now, his father fully expected him to become a miller. Great job, ordinary job, a real job, a legacy job.
Yeah.
But Rembrandt becomes a painter. Why? Why at that moment? And it is that perfect storm which involves the environment, John, and commercial expansion, leading to an unbelievable change in Dutch society, leading to a new religion, a new way of life, a new empire, a totally new perception of themselves. They end up again, and this is the interesting thing, a bit like now, periods of great social change offer people opportunities, but they tend typically to end in war. And the Dutch ended up in war with the English. There were 3 wars with the English in the 17th century, which is, and eventually the Dutch ended up taking over England. Not even, it was a coup d'etat by William of Orange, who we know from our friends up the north, on the 12th, which is next Friday, we'll be bashing drums about a fella I can bet you they know nothing about. Okay? But I'll tell you all about William of Orange, right? So Rembrandt becomes an apprentice painter. And he gets a job painting the middle classes of Amsterdam. And the middle classes became obsessed with portraits. But who were these middle classes? These middle classes were merchant traders. So the Dutch, having had it's a classic small open economy model, right? You have a tiny, tiny country. You cannot get rich trading with yourself because there's not enough of you. And you'll eventually cannibalize your market. So you have to trade with lots of people. The reason the Swedish ship gets stuck is the Swedes always exported timbers. Of course, the Dutch needed timbers because they were driving massive, massive timber fortifications into the dikes. Right? So they basically wedged them up with timber and then they cover them with clay. More timber. Where did they get the timber? There ain't no forests in Holland. Okay, if you've been to Holland, it's not really noticeable for its forests, right? They got their forests.
Couldn't prop them up with tulips.
Exactly. Well, it's all the tulips are in there too. Because the Dutch became great botanists, really, really good botanists. And the reason they became, all this is interesting, right, is that the mini ice age emerges in the very, very late 16th century, early 17th century. Cereal production in Holland collapses. Why? Because the land doesn't generate any yields. This generates a massive movement of peasant farmers and millers into the city. They have to do something. At the same time, the Dutch figure out that if they can't feed themselves, they have to feed themselves with imports of grain from elsewhere. But they need money to do that. How are they going to get the money if they can't trade with themselves and they can't generate the money? They're going to have to go out and trade with other people. This is why they send those ships. This is why the Dutch have colonies in South Africa, the Boers,
Yeah.
in Zanzibar, a Muslim area of
Yeah,
East
I've been
Africa. Yeah, originally a Dutch colony. Goa, I bet you've been there too, haven't you?
Yeah.
You did your little hippie trip, didn't you?
I did, yeah.
Zanzibar, India, in various stages of degradation.
Me and Don Jr.
Yeah. Ceylon, which is now, of course, Sri Lanka,
Yeah.
Malacca, Borneo, all those places. So the Dutch went out, little small trading posts. They knew they had to trade. They brought back teaks and spices and mahogany and porcelain and oriental rugs and all these things that no Europeans had. And they turned Amsterdam into a trading entrepot. Entrepot in a French sort of way, right?
Yes.
It was basically, they learned how, they were the first race that figured out you don't have to make stuff to become rich. You just have to trade them
Yes.
and
Yeah,
take
yeah.
a cut. So it's actually...
And that was their genius, wasn't
That was
it?
their genius, and it's the model for basically every small open economy. For Ireland, for Singapore, for Finland, for Holland still, is the idea that if you are small, you have to figure out a way of outmaneuvering the big guys.
Yeah.
The Frances,
Yeah.
the Britons of this world, etc. And the Dutch figured all this out. And of course, it's into that world that Rembrandt is born. But his dad was sitting in the boozer with his mates thinking, hold on a second, my son doesn't have a real job. How is he going to make a crust? Not understanding that the changes in society, the changes in technology, the changes in demography were all creating new jobs rather than old jobs. So
But his dad's problem was that the Little Ice Age, for instance, was really affecting him.
of course,
And so
exactly.
and so he was a kind of applying that thinking to his son and to all of society. Oh my God, we can't grow grain, we can't mill, we can't do this, that. and all
well,
this.
given that last weekend I was in King's Bar in Connemara in Roundstone, okay, discussing the plight of our children, it was very, very clear that the other dads we were chatting to, right, and then we were actually talking to a few locals as well.
Yeah,
There was all this sense that our world has been affected by globalization in a good way, but now maybe in a bad way, right?
Yeah,
You can sense the things coming in, a bit like Mr. Rembrandt's dad. And at the same time, our kids are trying to find their feet, but the jobs that used to exist for kids no longer exist.
yeah.
And therefore,
yeah,
in your
yeah.
20s, you're trying to figure your way out, as Rembrandt was.
Yeah.
But the point was, his father couldn't see that because every generation, this is the point, every generation has as almost a default position that the ones coming up behind them are not as hardworking, not as clever, not as focused, etc. But that's not the case. Basically, what we're saying is that the whole world is in a state of, as Sean O'Casey would say, a state of chassis, right?
Yeah.
And therefore, what's happening in all the economies is simply the economy is churning. Now, the fascinating thing is this is a very healthy situation. When the economy is static and not changing, that's when old social hierarchies become ingrained. Now, the reason that Holland is so fascinating for us is because it's also a place where you have a new religion, Calvinists.
Right.
They're
yeah.
exporting that religion through William of Orange's armies all around Europe.
Yeah.
They're in alliance with the Protestant Swedes in the 30 Years' War. They are technologically, you mentioned the tulips. The fascinating thing about the tulips is the tulips was part of a massive agricultural technological innovation that the Dutch were figuring out. It was like how do we get better yields? Our country is increasing population. We have a small land mass. How do we get better yields? And the tulips, the reason the Dutch were so interested in tulips was that they were always messing around with horticulture.
Yeah.
And the reason they were messing around with horticulture is because of this necessity of getting higher yields out of the land. The land was both small and affected by the mini ice age.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
the part of Holland that you could actually grow stuff on was getting smaller and smaller and smaller, which is why they reclaimed the land.
Yes.
They wouldn't have reclaimed the land had it not been for the mini ice age. They reclaimed the land because they needed more land close to the sea. Why? Because land close to the sea is warmer in an ice age.
Right.
So
of course.
it's really
yeah.
fascinating,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Because the sea is always that little bit warmer than the land,
Yeah.
right? So fascinatingly, this all comes together. And what you have is a society in a massive, massive phase of social and economic churn, out of which come new jobs, new professions, new ideas, but we never see them at the time, because at the time we're always holding on to the old ideas. And this, I think, is one of the themes that's permeating through all the politics we see, right? This is why, when Trump appeals to the coal miners of Pennsylvania, what he's basically appealing to is old, real jobs, right? It was a real
He's
job.
selling nostalgia.
He's selling nostalgia. Le Pen is selling nostalgia. I think in another way, Keir Starmer in England is selling nostalgia. I think he's selling, look, you had the Brexit thing, you had the madness. Look, I'm going to sell you stability. Do you remember that guy?
Yeah.
He was nice. He was stable. We quite liked him. He's selling stability at a time when the population is angst-ridden because of economic instability.
Yeah. I mean, that whole phrase, MAGA, make America great again, when you actually talk to MAGAs and say, well, when was America great? America was never really great. What was great about it was the familiar, and that's kind of comforting. And that's why it hits home so well.
But this is the interesting. The Ireland is full guys. Their cap should be MISA, make Ireland shite again.
Yes,
because that's what they're trying to do. They're saying, let's all go back to the 70s, right? When it was really shit.
Yeah.
And we had the Catholic Church, and we had comely maidens, and we had no immigrants, and we'd know this, right? So MISA should be our new watchword, right?
Yeah.
For the Irish Independence Party. Make Ireland shite again. The whole idea is, when seen through this prism, you begin to understand what is actually happening in politics. That what is happening is real jobs, legacy jobs, are being shattered by technological change and by globalization and by offshoring and all this sort of stuff. We never see the new jobs emerging because we can't conceive of them. So what's wrong with people is that most people just think they can't figure out precisely what's happening. And you realize that precisely is the word that matters. That humans actually like precision. We like stability. We like certainty. We like the idea, okay, that's going to be the same tomorrow. And nobody knows what is coming. And it's that very lack of precision, that very lack of ability to plan for the future, which is a function, ironically, of the healthy economy and the economy in its total state of churn, that is this cleavage between economic growth rates, which are strong, and economic anxiety, which is also enormous. And maybe that's actually a thing of economics that economists have never really explained.
So as an economist, you had that chat with your dad back in, or he had that chat with you going, economics, what's all that about? Codology.
It was actually, that was the great thing. He said, economics is a cod. I just think that we should put that up on the podcast. Economics, that's a cod, which I thought was great. You remember my dad. He was very black and white. Very black. And of course, my mother then tried to force me to be a school teacher. I told you the story.
Yeah.
The one with the melodeon. And I had to flee, pretend I couldn't speak Irish. Right?
Well, my aunt actually said to me when I started working in recording studios, she said, would you ever go get yourself a proper job? Like join the guards or something. Do you know, my friend, her husband was a guard. And when he died, didn't they look after her very well?
Exactly.
The logic of that was just like, what?
But I mean, think about it now. Middle-class Irish people say to their children, be lawyers. Be accountants. Go and work in the big four. Go and work on all those things. If you think about AI, and you think about the changes that are going to happen in lots and lots of those professions, they're going to change dramatically, not always for the positive. But so it's almost always the case that at a time of technological change, the advice of the parents is not only misguided, it's wrong. Because they're actually looking to a world that existed in the 1970s or 1980s or in the 2000s that has completely changed.
So give us some examples then of these big changes.
Well, I'm just thinking, right? So amazing to you think about it, even 30 years ago, right? 1999, 25 years ago, there was 50,820 telephone operators working in the United States, right? That's not that long ago. Like a telephone operator plugging in. Do you remember when we used to be down the Gaeltacht and you'd have to collect calls?
Yeah.
It wasn't collect, it was collect in America. What was it called in Ireland?
A trunk call.
A trunk call. And somebody say, I collect you now with that high.
Yeah.
You make, and you wait for ages, then you get the things. The wind up, right? So In 1999, 25 years ago, there were nearly 60,000 people employed in America as telephone operators. I'm just giving you extreme examples, right? There were hundreds of thousands of machine tool operators.
That would fill Aviva.
I know. This is like a Taylor Swift concert of telephone operators, all with grey rinses, right?
Yeah.
Sheet metal workers, tool operators. There were thousands and thousands. Your friend Bruce Springsteen sings about this all the time.
Yeah.
They have been automated out of existence, okay? Amazing, when we were kids, many of our sisters or elder sisters or friends or whatever were told in the 1970s to go and do a secretarial course, right?
Yeah.
Remember that?
Yeah.
It was only girls, it was never blokes, right?
Yeah.
Secretarial course to become
It's a great skill.
It's a great skill to become a typist.
Yeah.
To become a secretary. They're gone too. You don't hear anything about this, right? Just, you think
I remember my sister doing the shorthand test.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. It's a skill that's gone, right?
Yeah.
I mean, in the extreme example, travel agents, an exotic creature. You don't see many of them knocking around anymore. Video shop managers, right? Oh, what I'm saying is they're the obvious examples. But these types of changes have just gushed through society. And in their place, this is the interesting thing, are jobs you never heard of in 1999. So you think like a data scientist.
Yeah.
Nobody's ever heard of that.
A podcaster.
A podcaster is a great example. A podcaster. The world might be better off, John, without podcasters, right?
I don't think so, Mark. I don't think so.
Data analysts, statisticians. I mean, I worked with statisticians in the central bank, but they were few and far between years ago. I'll give you some statistics in America, right? In America, the number of statisticians doubled between 2008 and 2018, and they are now projecting that growth rate of 31% per year for data scientists in the United States, right? In the US, the number of software developers, again, job that nobody had ever heard of, has grown by 360% from around 500,000 people in 1999 to 1.8 million in 2022.
Wow.
So these are jobs that nobody ever heard of. What about a social media manager? A content creator, John?
Yes, that's us.
Content, a curator.
Yes, of course.
Or an influencer, right? Okay, these are real jobs. Like your mother would say, like, if your kids came home and said, I'm going to be an influencer, you say, get a real job.
Yeah.
But these are real jobs that are a function of the way we consume media, the way we consume telecom, all that sort of stuff. So what you're seeing is an extraordinary change of what constitutes a real job.
But AI is coming for them all.
It's coming for them all, but maybe the person with AI is coming for them all. Maybe AI not.
Yeah.
Maybe the person who's good at AI is coming for them all. It's like, for example, years ago, the fellow who was good at Excel, everyone thought he was a genius.
Yes.
He was only good at Excel because Excel had just come in. And you'd say, whip us up a graph there. And the fellow, you'd say, my God, that fella's a genius, right?
He's creating those schemes.
He's creating those things.
Okay, so give us some more figures then.
Well, I'm just thinking, John. You have become a content curator.
Yes.
A podcaster.
That's fabulous one
Dare
too.
I say it, an influencer. Okay? An influencer, right? And before you know it, John, you'll be described as a social media manager. All new. That's the fascinating thing.
Yeah.
Everything you do now for a living, and in fact, I do now for a living, wasn't even thought of 20 years ago. That's the mad thing.
Yeah.
That is the mad thing. And it's the whole key is the ability to kind of move and adjust and adapt and go for it, right? And I see amongst, not so much just peers, but people I've heard and, reading stuff, is that those who in our generation stuck to the good job, the real job, right, are now those who feel most isolated because they can see in their companies that the kids are coming in with different skills and different ideas and selling to different people. And they, I think, feel very much, I'm in the corner office, I've done well, but I've got a big target in my back.
Yeah, but so what you're saying then is that all this technological change and societal change and attitude change is manifesting itself in political change.
Absolutely. And I think that's what we've seen, not just this weekend, but we've seen it over the last 4 or 5 years. It's an anxiety is coming from the bottom up, which has been informed by a change in good jobs or real jobs or legacy jobs. And this is making people very anxious. And because we can't see the new jobs in front of us, we hark back to the old nostalgia. And that's, I think, a good way of looking at what's going on.
Okay. Let's get into that a little bit more after this.
Cool.
Okay, we're looking at all this change that's going on
Yeah.
in society and economically and in industry
Yeah.
and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it's manifesting itself and it's coming out.
In all sorts of areas.
Yeah, but particularly in politics.
Yeah. Yeah.
So talk to me a little bit more about that.
I think it's a political question. Just another very interesting leading indicator of change is, and this social and economic changes, if you look at the S&P 500, so the biggest companies in the United States, and you look at the sectors that they were in 25 years ago, right?
Yeah.
The very dominant sectors were banks,
Yeah.
insurance companies,
Yeah.
big companies like Coca-Cola,
Yeah.
right? Pharmaceutical companies, but they weren't quite as big, and oil companies. I mean, the oil companies were so big, they used to be called the Seven Sisters, right? Massive companies. They're not there anymore. If you look at all the big companies in America, it's NVIDIA, it's Apple, it's Facebook, Meta, whatever you want to call it, it's Alphabet, it's all the tech companies. Most of those companies didn't exist 25 years ago, or if they did, they were either very embryonic or quite shabby.
Yeah.
So what you've seen is this total shift in the power base of the economy, away from consumer-driven brands like Coca-Cola, banks, insurance companies, oil companies, resource-driven, to technology.
Yeah.
So with that has become a massive change in the pecking order. So again, in the old days, bankers were very posh.
Yeah, yeah.
Now tech bros earn multiples of the bankers. The whole economic power base has shifted, right? And of course, that creates an enormous anxiety of those people who were being advised by their parents to go into the old jobs. So the parents haven't figured out that the world has changed. They're still telling their kids, oh, go and be an accountant, go and be a banker, go and be... But actually, that also is manifest in one other observation, John,
Yeah.
which is the following. In the United States, there's been a massive rise in overqualified graduates in old legacy jobs feeling very dissatisfied. I'll give you a figure, right? Only 55% of people who are deemed overqualified are satisfied with the jobs, as opposed to 72% of people who are deemed qualified, right? So we're producing these...
Overqualified is a first degree and a master's.
And something else, right?
Yeah,
It's what we call elite overproduction. It's an American economist called Tuchin has this theory that all societies collapse when they start to produce an elite and produce too many elites. And then the elites get pissed off because they don't have the right jobs. And then they are the vanguard of the revolution. It's an interesting idea.
Right.
It's a very,
Okay.
very
As
interesting.
opposed to people getting pissed off
Because they're underneath.
because they're
basically-
underneath and they get
Yeah.
pissed off the elites, right?
So what he's saying is,
Everyone
he's
get
saying,
pissed off at each other.
he's saying, yeah, exactly. But he's saying that basically what causes political instability is not the poor getting pissed off at the rich. It's the elite getting pissed off at the rich. So you produce a bureaucratic
Okay.
elite class of
Yeah.
academics and you know, as you said, master's students and then PhD students. They all fully expect to be top dogs because they have the academic
course.
and
Yeah,
institutional
yeah.
and educational qualifications. Then they go into the economy, which is changing really quickly, and they can't find their position because their position, they have to find it. The economy can't find it for them, and they become incredibly angry, and they form the basis of real disgruntlement. It's a very interesting theory, and I think it has a lot of applications. Because if you look at most revolutionaries, you know, people like Lenin, they weren't poor. They were rich. Okay, De Valera
Right.
went to Blackrock College. These are not poor people. These are
Yeah.
rich people,
Yeah, yeah,
reasonably
yeah.
rich people. If you think of all the Che Guevara was, you know, the son of doctors. He was a doctor himself. So this idea is that the elite overproduction creates a class that become disgruntled, and that creates the vanguard of a revolutionary movement, or at least a political movement for change. I think it's quite interesting.
It's very interesting,
And it's all
yeah.
part of what we're seeing here.
Yeah.
It's all part of what we're seeing here. Take, for example, Revolut. Revolut said they're coming into the Irish mortgage market next year. That means that they will destroy the Irish banking system as we know it,
Yeah.
or they will take a massive chunk of it. Why? Because they're financed by bonds. So they go and they basically raise money in the bond market and they can spend it here. They also have a very big deposit base, which they aren't spending. The Irish banks, in the old days, get a good job in the bank. Do you remember that?
Oh, yeah.
You're right.
Yeah.
You could put on a suit every day. You could go to the banks. Right now, or in the next few years, these new banks are going to eat the lunch of the old banks. And that means a whole layer of like the bank manager. That was a big deal when we were kids. The bank manager. He was like and it was always a he. And he was an important man in the town. If you look around Irish towns, the nicest buildings in Irish towns were always the Bank of Ireland, our Ulster Bank, our AIB, this big kind of Victorian solid bank emanating power. That's gone now.
Yeah, he had the power to kind of, you either progress or you don't.
Yeah, because he gave you money or he didn't.
Exactly,
right?
yeah.
But that's all gone now. So this is part of the whole procedure. But let's conclude by going back to Rembrandt, John.
Indeed.
It is very easy to become afraid of change. It is very easy to become the person who says, stop this far and no further. It's very, very easy to be the person who says, this is just not right. Let's go back to the way it was. But that presupposes that the economy can stop. And it presupposes that the economy at a state of rest or a state of equilibrium is where we should be. But on the contrary, the more churn there is in the economy, the healthier it is. And the more dynamic it is, and the more innovation there is, and the more clever people are coming to the top and doing new things. So whereas Rembrandt's father, and I have a lot of sympathy for him, he might not know that now, but I do have a lot of sympathy for him, understood that his son hadn't a real job and was out there painting portraits of people. And as far as he was concerned, there was no future in this. And of course, Rembrandt was the leading light in the entire movement, himself and Vermeer, of Dutch masters. And so every time you hear, get a real job, you've also got to hear the idea that in the angst and in the DNA of every parent's anxiety about getting a real job and why can't you just get knuckled down, there's a new Rembrandt just about to emerge just around the corner. And we can't see them because we can never see the future. We're back again with the second installment of our Schumpeter slot. Now, An Post, who have a range of products to help SMEs in Ireland, have asked us to revamp and resurrect the Schumpeter slot.
That's great, because as we all know, the backbone of the Irish economy is SMEs.
So if you're interested in economics and you want to know what makes our economy sink or swim, you need to understand what's happening with these smaller businesses. And that's what we're going to dig into in partnership with An Post Commerce on this new Schumpeter slot.
Great. Go on, tell us.
So the other day, I had a lovely little chat with We Are Riley, courtesy of An Post, a company that relies on strong national delivery services.
And actually, one of the other interesting things about We Are Riley is the challenges they face, not only in getting their name out there, but working with a partner such as An Post that can help them scale as their business grows. And that's an issue that a lot of growing companies face as well.
Exactly. So let's get on the phone, talk to Lauren from We Are Riley. I am talking now to Lauren Duggan of We Are Riley. Lauren, first of all, how are you? Good to see you.
Great. I'm doing really well. How are you?
I'm flying. Now tell me, We Are Riley. Why Riley? Explain the name first before we go into the company.
When we started the business, we wanted to create a name that was very inclusive. So it wasn't too kind of female focused and it was much more inclusive. So we wanted to go with a unisex name. And then the life of Riley, a carefree, luxurious existence.
Who doesn't want it? Who doesn't want it? Tell us about the company. Tell us when you started, why you started. I know you were talking about a carefree existence, but why you started, the products, and then the difficulty of setting up.
Yeah, of course. So we started the business back in 2021, so just over 3.5 years ago now. And it was myself and my two co-founders. And the idea really came about because we were so frustrated with never having period products when we needed them. We were constantly running out. And then when we started to do market research to kind of options in the market, we were shocked to learn the amount of toxins and chemicals that were in the mainstream products that we had always been using. And that was kind of the catalyst, really. From there, we decided we'd just do it on our own. And that was kind of how Riley was born, really.
Now, okay, so you have to explain, right? Again, I know it's so pathetic in the 21st century, but explain to a man why the provision of period products, which every woman needs, is so, in your idea, deficient. Explain that to me, because I mean, this is something I would have just, blokes, we just assume that it's over there and it's all looked after.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, I suppose, one, the quality of the products on the market wasn't good enough. The amount of toxins, chemicals, bleach, things that should not be kind of really, you shouldn't be putting into your body.
So these things are going into a woman's body.
Yeah, exactly. So these are products directly inserting into your body in some cases. So they should be very organic and healthy. And I think there was just a real lack of, I suppose, innovation in the market. So when we designed our products, we wanted them to be 100% organic cotton, no toxins, no chemicals. So in essence, better for your body, better for the planet.
Wonderful. Now tell me, so how's it been going? You're 2.5 years going now. There are 3 years. How's the market turned out to be?
It's been a really wild journey. We started in a garage in West Cork. So we started off, the three of us, packing and shipping boxes directly to our customers on a subscription basis. And I suppose 3 years on now, we have 3 distribution channels. We're shipping all across Europe and the UK. We've taken on funding, which has been an exciting journey, but that's allowed us to grow our team. So we're a team of 11 now.
So tell me, how did you reach the customers? I mean, you are 3 women sitting down saying, hold on a second, these products aren't good enough. You go from there in West Cork. How do you go from a company of 9 employees now, distribution channels, it seems, all around the world?
Yeah, so we started off, I suppose, moved to a warehouse and we were using An Post to actually deliver all around Ireland. So we did a subscription service. So given the nature of our products, it makes a lot of sense to have a subscription service so you never run out. So that is one channel. We now are also in retail. So we're stocked in the likes of Dunn's and Mars pharmacies. And then I suppose thirdly, we do a lot now. A big focus of ours is on corporate partnerships. So again, like we fundamentally believe that period products should be as readily available as toilet paper in all public bathrooms. And that's a message that we're really trying to hammer home. So we now have over 300 corporate partners on board. So the likes of PwC, Microsoft, EY are now providing these in the employee bathrooms in offices, which is such a nice, I suppose, step in the right direction.
Success. That's a massive success.
Yeah, it's been great. I suppose it's a whole new distribution channel that hasn't really been done before. You know, I think offering period products hasn't been the norm, but we're trying to kind of, I suppose, change that narrative. And most recently now, we just started working with the government here in Ireland. So we were just awarded the preferred supplier under their new period equality framework, which is really exciting because it means now that we can make them accessible in hospitals, schools, jails, you know, central and local governments. And so, yeah, I think it's a really nice step in the right direction. They should be available.
They should be. Of course they should be available.
Yeah.
Like, tell me, how has your relationship with An Post helped you expand this business? Because again, you know, it's a business, you've got to get a product from A to B.
Yeah, they've been amazing and helping us scale, I suppose, at every step of the business from, you know, where we started to where we are now. We've grown with them. But I think, I suppose, as a subscription service, and particularly given the nature of our products, a fast, reliable service is everything. So that's really kind of, I suppose, where they've excelled. And we have a 5-star Trustpilot review down to our service level. So, you know, that in itself kind of speaks for itself.
And come here, Lauren, just lastly, where do we find you? Where do the listeners find you?
If you go onto our website at weareriley.com, you can find out all the information.
Wonderful. So, Lauren, that was wonderful. I know you're busy. You're going to fly there. You're in a car park. Multitasking is the way. Listen, we'll talk to you again, Lauren. That was wonderful. Thank you very much.
Thanks, David. Great to speak to you.
So there you have it. A very interesting take there from We Are Riley on how they approach selling organic sanitary products. I love the level of innovation you see from a business that has just a few people. It's incredible stuff.
Yeah, what a great story, Mac. And We Are Riley are growing at a massive rate by identifying new opportunities within their industry. For example, the subscription-based solution, which didn't exist before. And as Laura mentioned, the B2B partnerships along with the government contract. So they're flying it. But all these opportunities meant that they needed a reliable, trusted delivery partner who could scale with them as they grew and reassure them that they could handle all this new business. As Ireland's National Postal Service, An Post is Ireland's most trusted delivery partner, knowing every corner of the country. They also have a huge automated parcel sorting campus, which means that they can support scaling businesses like We Are Riley and also have an expert sales team who can support new growing businesses.
Exactly, John.
It's great hearing stories like that. So join us next time on the Schumpeter Slot with An Post.